Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In a dusty gymnasium bathed in afternoon light, an arrogant young boxer warmed up in front of his comrades. His reputation was well established, he won all his local fights with disconcerting ease. Adrenaline gave him wings, and his overflowing ego drove him to mock anyone who dared to criticize his talent. As he launched a series of rapid blows at the punching bag, he spotted the man at the back of the room, a calm, almost ordinary-looking old man, watching every move with piercing eyes. The others had fallen silent, respectful, even intimidated by his mere presence. But the young, self-assured boxer saw only a silent spectator. "Hey, Grandpa," he said with a mocking smile. "Do you think you could beat me?" A heavy silence filled the room. The old man stood slowly, and a shiver ran through the audience. It was Chuck Norris, living legend, undisputed master of martial arts. His gaze, calm but incisive, pierced the young boxer like an invisible blade. "Are you sure you want to test this?" Chuck asked, his voice low but authoritative. The young man burst out laughing, completely underestimating the threat. "Come on, Grandpa, show me what you can do." Seconds later, what was supposed to be a friendly encounter turned into an unforgettable lesson. In a split second, the young boxer realized, on the ground, the true power and mastery of a martial arts master. The humiliation was complete, but the lesson was indelible. The boxing gym vibrated to the rhythm of punches against the bags and the shouts of the young fighters. Among them, 19-year-old Jake Thompson was the undisputed star. Tall, muscular, and fast, he racked up local victories like it was child's play. Each punch sounded like further proof of his superiority. That day, an eerie atmosphere hung in the gym. An older man, quiet but imposing, watched the training sessions from the back of the room. His movements were measured, each breath calculated. The other boxers greeted him respectfully, but Jake, confident in himself, noticed nothing but a silent spectator. "Hey!" Jake called, approaching the old man. "Did you come to watch or to make a fool of yourself?" The man didn't smile. He remained motionless, simply attentive. "Do you want me to show you what a real punch feels like?" Jake continued, his voice full of arrogance. "Or are you just going to pretend to impress me?" The other boxers exchanged worried glances. The man advanced slowly. His build wasn't massive, but his presence seemed to fill the entire room. "I can show you, if you're willing to learn," he said calmly. Jake burst out laughing. The idea that an old man could compete with him was unthinkable. "Come on, Grandpa. Show me what you can do." Seconds later, a perfectly executed kick, followed by a series of fluid movements, sent Jake reeling. He realized too late that he had underestimated his opponent. In an instant, he found himself on the ground, his arrogance swept away by a mastery he had never imagined. "That's it, the difference between a novice and a master," the man murmured. Jake, breathless and humiliated, looked up and finally recognized the unexpected guest, Chuck Norris. The laughter died down. The entire gym held its breath. And in Jake's eyes, a new reality dawned: he had a lot to learn. The next day, Jake returned to the gym, still scarred by the previous day's humiliation. His muscles ached, but his wounded pride drove him to make amends. Chuck Norris was already there, motionless near the mat, watching the young boxer arrive. "You're back," Chuck said calmly. "That means you're ready to learn, or your ego is bigger than your reason." Jake felt a mixture of fear and defiance. "I want to learn," he replied, even though part of him feared what that entailed. The teacher began with the basics: posture, breathing, concentration. Jake, accustomed to powerful but impulsive blows, quickly realized that his quick but haphazard movements weren't enough. Every correction from Chuck confronted him with his mistakes. "Brute strength doesn't win a fight," Chuck explained, guiding Jake's arms. "It's precision, timing, and self-control that make the difference." In the following days, training became almost a ritual. Jake endured drills no ordinary boxer would ever have imagined: impossible dodges, silent movements, chaining punches with his eyes closed. His muscles screamed with fatigue, but his mind began to understand the logic behind each movement. One evening, after a long training session, Jake sat down, exhausted but amazed. Chuck leaned back against him and said, "You have the potential, but you must forget that you are a local champion. Here, you are a student. And a humble student learns faster than an arrogant master." For the first time, Jake felt that humility could be a strength. A spark of respect was born for the master who had humbled him but showed him a path to something much greater. But the adventure was only just beginning. Chuck had planned a final test for Jake, a challenge that would test everything he'd learned, and reveal whether his arrogance could truly be transformed into discipline. A week into his training, Jake stood on the mat, his heart pounding. Chuck Norris watched him with a stern, attentive gaze. Today was no ordinary training session. Jake was going to face the other students in the gym, each an expert in their field. "This isn't a fight to prove your strength," Chuck explained. "It's a test to see if you can control your body and mind." Jake nodded, knowing that pride alone would no longer be enough. His first opponent was a young karateka, fast and precise. On the first attack, Jake tried to use his usual boxing reflexes, and was immediately knocked off balance. The last-minute dodged kick reminded him how much he still had to learn. Each subsequent fight was a lesson. A taekwondo expert attacked him with lightning speed, a judoka tried to knock him to the ground, and a kung fu specialist tested his coordination and patience. Each time, Jake failed, but each time, Chuck reminded him to breathe, focus, and feel the movement rather than react impulsively. After a series of humiliating but rewarding defeats, Jake knelt, panting, his body covered in sweat. Chuck approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do you see now? Victory comes not from strength, but from discipline. And every failure is a brick in the construction of your true potential." For the first time, Jake felt a deep admiration for his master. He understood that his former arrogance was the barrier that prevented him from becoming a true fighter. As he left the mat that night, he knew the real test would be even tougher, facing an experienced master, and finding out if he had truly absorbed everything Chuck had taught him. As the weeks passed, Jake progressed rapidly under Chuck Norris's strict tutelage. His technique was refined, his speed increased, and his mind became calmer and clearer. But Chuck knew that Jake's apprenticeship would not be complete until he faced an opponent capable of truly surprising him. That day, an unexpected visitor entered the gym, Marcus Kane, a legendary fighter from another country, known for his brutality and ingenuity. Whispers quickly spread, "No one has ever lasted more than 2 rounds against him." Jake felt his heart race. His first sensation of pure fear in a long time. Chuck, at his side, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember everything you have learned. Breathe, observe, and let your body react before your mind." The fight began. Marcus attacked without warning, mixing punches, kicks, and surprising throws. Jake had to draw on everything Chuck had taught him: precise dodges, perfect timing, controlled breathing. Every move was calculated, every gesture carefully considered. Despite his courage and technique, Jake took several powerful blows. He felt his limits, his body trembled, and his old arrogance wanted to return to save him. But he remembered Chuck's words: "Strength without discipline is nothing." As Marcus launched an impressive final attack, Jake, in an instinctive move learned over the weeks, counterattacked with a precision no one believed possible for him. Marcus was thrown off balance, surprised by the fluidity and speed of the attack. The fight ended with this gesture, marking a symbolic victory for Jake. Breathless, but proud, he looked at Chuck. "You've made progress," Chuck said simply. "But real learning never ends. It's not the victory that matters, but how you learn from each experience." Jake understood then that becoming a true fighter meant not only mastering his body, but also understanding his mind and humility. And he knew that new, even more difficult challenges awaited him. After his confrontation with Marcus Kane, Jake felt invincible, but this newfound confidence was fragile. Chuck Norris knew that Jake's greatest battle wasn't against an external opponent, but against his own self-doubt and impatience. One morning, another student arrived at the gym, Elena Vargas, a formidable young fighter renowned for her speed and tactical intelligence. She had studied various martial arts and was able to anticipate her opponent's movements with astonishing precision. For the first time, Jake felt a sense of unease. "You have to understand one thing," Chuck said before the fight. "It's not always the strongest who wins. Sometimes it's the one who stays calm under pressure." The fight began. Elena easily dodged Jake's blows, putting him in awkward positions and forcing him to react. Every attack seemed anticipated, every predictable move countered. Jake felt his mind waver. His yesterday's pride, his newfound confidence, everything seemed to crumble. But Chuck, from the edge of the tatami, shouted, "Remember your training. Breathe, analyze, find the weakness." Jake closed his eyes for a moment, slowing his breathing. He recalled every lesson: observation, timing, fluidity, self-control. He realized then that Elena wasn't invincible, she had patterns, habits he could exploit. In a calculated sequence, Jake used his acquired speed and precision to counter Elena. This time, he didn't just hit hard, he used the energy of Elena's attack against her, destabilizing her and winning the crucial point. Breathless but clear-headed, Jake understood a crucial truth: confidence alone was not enough. It took a combination of discipline, patience, and humility to overcome opponents, especially those who seemed invincible. Chuck, with a slight smile, approached. "Today you learned something more important than any technique. You learned to fight with your mind, not just your fists." Jake felt that a new chapter of his learning had just begun, and that no arrogance could ever blindly guide him again. Over the next few weeks, Jake continued his intensive training with Chuck Norris. Every movement, every breath, every dodge became more natural, more precise. Yet Chuck knew that Jake's true test had yet to arrive. That test wouldn't come from another ordinary fighter, but from a situation where everything he'd learned would be put to the test, simultaneously. One evening, when the gym was almost empty, Chuck sat him down. "Tomorrow, you'll face someone you can't underestimate. It will be a realistic simulation, where you'll have to fight against an experienced opponent, but also manage stress, fatigue, and unforeseen events." Jake felt a mixture of excitement and fear. This was what he'd both been waiting for and dreading. He'd made progress, but he knew that this time he couldn't rely on technique alone, his mental strength and patience would be crucial. The next day, on a tatami mat transformed into an arena, his opponent was revealed, a mixed martial arts expert known for his physical strength and speed. From the start, the fight was intense. Each of Jake's attacks was countered with precision, each dodge requiring extreme concentration. He took several blows, and his body was beginning to tire. But this time, something had changed. Jake didn't panic. He took a deep breath, analyzed every move, and used the strategy Chuck had taught him: let his opponent reveal his patterns, then strike at the exact moment he was vulnerable. A critical moment arrived. His opponent attempted a powerful blow that could have easily knocked him out. Instinctively, Jake dodged, pivoted, and used his opponent's momentum to knock him off balance. With a precise and controlled sequence, he managed to neutralize the attack, marking a turning point in the fight. By the end of the round, both fighters were exhausted. Jake, panting but standing, looked at Chuck, who nodded approvingly. "Today you faced more than brute force. You faced doubt, fatigue, and fear. You are becoming a true fighter." For the first time, Jake felt pride, not in his victory, but in having overcome his limitations and mastered himself. He understood that the road was still long, but that he was ready for the challenges ahead, greater and more unpredictable. After months of rigorous training, Jake was beginning to master the art of combining strength, technique, and mental strength. But Chuck knew the next challenge wouldn't just be physical. It was time for Jake to face an opponent who would challenge his emotions as much as his skills, someone with ties to his past. One evening, when the gym was silent, Chuck called out to him. "Tomorrow, you won't just be fighting to test your body. You'll be fighting to understand something about yourself." Jake frowned, intrigued but confident. The next day, the opponent was revealed: Michael Rivers, his old high school rival, the one who had publicly humiliated him in boxing competitions. Michael had continued to train and now possessed an impressive mastery of mixed martial arts. "Jake," Michael said, approaching, a mocking smile on his face. "I was wondering when you'd be ready to face me for real." The fight began, and from the very first seconds, Jake felt the emotional tension wash over him. Each blow struck not only his opponent but also his accumulated memories of humiliation and anger. At first, he let these emotions guide his actions, wasting time and energy. Chuck watched carefully. "You must learn to fight without letting anger guide you. Use it, but don't let it control you." Taking a deep breath, Jake refocused. He reminded himself of each lesson: humility, patience, control, and precision. His movements became fluid, anticipating Michael's attacks without letting emotion overwhelm him. At a critical moment, Michael launched a quick and powerful combo, hoping to exploit Jake's anger. But Jake, calm and focused, dodged and countered with surprising precision. He managed to knock his opponent off balance, demonstrating not only his physical strength but also his mental mastery. At the end of the fight, Michael, breathless and impressed, held out his hand. "I didn't expect that. You've changed, Jake." Jake realized that this fight was not just a physical victory, but a victory over himself, over his doubts and past grudges. He understood that mastery of martial arts lay not only in strength, but in the ability to control oneself, to understand one's emotions, and to act with lucidity. Chuck, at his side, smiled slightly. "Today you have truly begun to become a master, but there is still a long way to go." Jake knew that new, even more formidable challenges awaited him, and that he had to continue to surpass himself to reach the true summit. A few months after overcoming his past, Jake received an unexpected invitation, an official tournament bringing together the best fighters in the country. Chuck Norris explained to him, "This tournament doesn't just test your physical skills. It tests your endurance, your strategy, and your mind. Every opponent will be different, and you'll have to adapt." Jake felt both excitement and tension. This was his chance to show off everything he'd learned, but he also knew that every mistake could cost him dearly. On tournament day, the arena was packed, the stands buzzing with energy and anticipation. Jake's first match pitted him against a kickboxing expert known for his incredible speed. From the start, Jake applied the discipline instilled by Chuck: precise dodges, measured attacks, and anticipation of moves. After several intense rounds, he won the match with a perfectly executed, strategic move. The second fight was even more difficult. His opponent was a judo specialist, using complex throws and holds. Jake felt fatigue building, but he focused on his balance, his breathing, and the counterattack strategy he'd learned from Chuck. Every move was precise, every decision calculated, and he finally neutralized his opponent with a clever combination. As the tournament progressed, the fights became more intense and demanding. Jake faced different styles: karate, kung fu, mixed martial arts, each presenting a new challenge. Fatigue and pressure mounted, but Jake remembered Chuck's teachings: patience, discipline, and emotional control. In the semi-final, his opponent was an experienced champion nicknamed the Tiger, renowned for his brutality and cunning. The fight was fierce. Jake took some powerful blows and felt his physical and mental limits tested. But he focused, analyzed his opponent's movements, and finally found the opening that allowed him to win the match. By the end of the day, Jake was exhausted but victorious. He had earned his spot in the finals, proving not only his physical strength, but more importantly his mental and emotional mastery. Chuck approached, proud. "You survived this tournament because you learned to combine technique, wit, and patience. But the real final will show you that the biggest battle is often against yourself." Jake then understood that the final test would not simply be a fight against an opponent, it would be the ultimate challenge of his transformation. The day of the tournament finals had arrived. The arena was packed, the spectators in a frenzy. Every fighter dreamed of winning the title, but for Jake, this fight represented much more than a simple victory. It was the culmination of months of training, discipline, and self-control. His opponent, Viktor Dragunov, a legendary fighter from abroad, known for his power, cunning, and cold-bloodedness. Whispers in the arena spoke of an unequal duel, as Victor seemed invincible. Jake, however, remembered Chuck's lessons: brute strength is never enough. Patience, observation, and control make all the difference. From the very first seconds, Victor launched a series of swift and powerful attacks, seeking to test Jake's reaction time. But this time, Jake was ready. He dodged fluidly, analyzing his opponent's every movement, every breath. His mental discipline allowed him to remain calm despite the pressure and fatigue. The fight lasted several intense rounds. Victor occasionally managed to land hits on Jake, but he never managed to completely destabilize him. Jake countered with precision, using not only his strength but also his strategy and mastery of martial arts. At a critical moment, Victor attempted a spectacular combo to surprise Jake. In a split second, Jake used a combination of dodge, pivot, and counterattack he had learned from Chuck. Victor was knocked off balance, and Jake's final blow sealed the victory. The arena erupted in applause. Jake, panting but standing, raised his hands. It was not just a victory over his opponent, but a victory over himself. His doubts, fear, and arrogance had been transformed into strength, discipline, and true confidence. Chuck Norris stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. Today, you have proven that you are not just a talented fighter. You are a true master, capable of controlling your body and mind. But remember, the path to mastery is endless. Jake understood that this tournament was just a step. Every fight, every lesson, and every challenge had forged his character. He was no longer the arrogant young boxer who mocked the masters. He had become a true warrior, ready for new, even greater challenges. A few weeks after his tournament victory, Jake stood in the same gym where it all began. But he was no longer the arrogant young boxer who mocked Chuck Norris. Every scar, every blow taken, and every lesson learned had sculpted not only his body, but his mind as well. Chuck approached, his gaze kind but piercing. "Look at you, Jake. You're not the same young man you were when you came in here. You've learned to fight, yes, but more importantly, you've learned to know yourself." Jake smiled, realizing he no longer sought validation through victory or the recognition of others. His pride had evolved. It was now based on discipline, mastery, and humility. To complete his training, Chuck proposed one last exercise, a mock fight, but this time Jake had to set the pace, understand every move, and guide his opponent with precision and respect. It wasn't about winning, but about demonstrating the perfect balance of technique, mentality, and martial ethics. The fight began, fluid and harmonious. Jake anticipated the moves, corrected his mistakes in real time, and respected his opponent's space and safety. Every movement was deliberate, every breath synchronized. He felt complete control over his body and mind, and a sense of peace washed over him. At the end, Chuck put his hand on Jake's shoulder and said, "You have achieved what few ever achieve. You are not just a fighter, you are a master. But always remember, true strength lies in humility and the willingness to learn, even after victory." Jake looked around the gym, the punching bags, the tatami mats, and remembered the arrogant young man who had mocked Chuck Norris a few months earlier. A genuine smile crossed his face. Everything had changed, and he knew this path to mastery never ended. As he left the gym, Jake felt a sense of certainty within him that he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, not to prove his strength, but to continue to grow, learn, and inspire those who would come after him. And in the shadows, Chuck Norris watched his pupil, a slight smile on his lips, knowing that the world had just gained a true master.